The harbor is still waking when their ship approaches the American coast. It is early morning, cold, and the light has not yet committed to day. For days the German prisoners had stared at only water, grey and endless, waiting to see the land of the enemy they had been taught to fear. Now, through the mist, shapes rise, shapes far larger, far more complex than anything they expected. Towers of steel cranes, endless piers, stacks of cargo containers. Ordinary to the Americans who work here, astonishing to the men who watch in silence. The ship slows, chains rattle, the harbor smells of salt, oil, diesel, and something else, movement, purpose, industry, a kind of calm power. The prisoners lean over the railings, no longer pretending not to look. They had been told that America was chaotic, disorganized, weak. But before them now lies a port more efficient than anything they've seen. Workers move with effortless coordination, guiding trucks, cranes, rail cars. No shouting, no panic, just steady rhythm. One of the prisoners whispers, "If the war came here, we were never told." Another mutters, almost involuntarily, "Mein Gott." The officers try to maintain discipline, telling the men to stand straight, to act as German soldiers should, but they themselves cannot hide their shock. They were briefed before capture. America is decadent. America's industry is collapsing. Their economy is fragile. And yet, here are ships greater than any in Hamburg cranes, larger than any in Bremen. Activity faster than any port in Europe. The gangway lowers with a heavy clank. The prisoners are ordered off the ship in groups. American guards wait, calm, alert, not hostile. No gloating, no raised voices, just professionalism. The Germans expect humiliation. They expect shouts, kicks, some display of dominance. Instead, they receive water. A medical check. A quick count. A simple instruction. Follow the line. The dissonance unsettles them more than anger would have. They march through the port, past mountains of cargo, pallets of machinery, stacks of processed food. Endless lines of trucks waiting to load or unload. One German officer, once proud and rigid, stares so openly that a younger prisoner tugs at his sleeve. The officer whispers, as if speaking the words aloud might break him, "This is one harbor, only one." The scale overwhelms even imagination. For the first time, they sense the enormity of the enemy's resources. At the edge of the docks, they see locomotives steaming, dozens of freight cars stretching into the distance, so many that their ends vanish into morning fog. The guards move them quickly, but the prisoners continue to stare, turning their heads as if trying to memorize the impossible. No propaganda had prepared them for this. No officer in Berlin had described a nation capable of producing so much, so fast, in such quantity that even its ports looked like vast mechanical cities. As the men stand in coded rows, waiting for transport inland, one question settles heavily in every mind. If this is only the beginning, what else will we see? And already the first cracks appear in their certainty, thin fractures running through everything they believed about America and about the war they fought. They are marched from the harbor to a temporary holding area, an open courtyard framed by brick warehouses and humming power cables. The sun has now risen fully, revealing details that earlier were only shadowed impressions. Forklifts zip between stacks of crates. Railway switchmen coordinate the movement of two converging trains with a few simple hand signals. Everything flows with an ease that feels almost unnatural to the prisoners. They stand in formation, unsure where to look first. Caught between fear and astonishment, registration tables are set up beneath a canvas awning. The Germans expect barking officers, slaps, or shoving. Instead, they meet clerks with pencils tucked behind their ears, stamping forms and handing out tin cups of water. The American soldiers overseeing the process inspect their documents, check for injuries, and move them along with quiet efficiency. A sergeant who cannot be older than 25 says, "Keep the line moving, gentlemen." in a tone so neutral that some prisoners stiffen in confusion, unsure if it is an insult or simply politeness. One prisoner, a farmer from Württemberg, studies the guards' uniforms. They are clean, well-fitted, unpatched. The boots are new. The equipment is standardized. Everything seems plentiful. In Germany, he remembers, units rotated boots between men and ammunition pouches varied from soldier to soldier. Here, even the simplest items appear mass-produced. He whispers to the man beside him, "Do you see it? They have enough for everyone." The man only nods. Swallowing hard, medical personnel examine the prisoners, quickly, thoroughly, without fear or hostility. A doctor checks temperatures, listens to lungs, takes notes. He asks a few questions through an interpreter, then moves on. One German soldier, wounded weeks ago and untreated, is taken aside. The Americans lift him gently onto a stretcher and carry him toward a field clinic set up behind the warehouses. The other prisoners watch in stunned silence. "Why would they help one of us?" someone mutters. The question hangs in the air with no answer. Each man receives a small paper packet, dry crackers, a few pieces of hard candy, a small tin of meat. It is not a feast, but the fact that enemy prisoners receive food at all feels surreal. An older corporal studies the label, Chicago, Illinois. Another tin, Des Moines, Iowa. Another, Fort Worth, Texas. Names he only knew from maps, now printed casually on packaging that seems produced by the millions as they move toward the loading area for their next transport. They pass a section of the port not visible from the ship, a storage field filled with trucks, jeeps and cranes arranged in perfect rows, hundreds of vehicles. Perhaps thousands. Some of the prisoners slow down, unable to keep marching. A guard taps the air with 2 fingers. Keep moving. But without menace they shuffle forward, eyes wide. One prisoner, once a confident supporter of the war, murmurs to no one in particular, "If they have this much here, waiting idle, what do they have at the front?" His voice cracks almost imperceptibly. Another adds, "And this is only one city, one harbor, and the war hardly touches them." The reality begins to settle like dust across their thoughts, slow, pervasive, undeniable. They reach a set of wooden benches near the tracks. A sergeant steps forward. He is calm, composed, respectful. "You'll be transported inland shortly," he announces. "You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Cooperate and you'll be safe." The prisoners exchange glances. Safety. The word feels foreign. While they wait, the constant hum of the port surrounds them. Whistles, engines, chains, metal on metal. Not chaos, coordination, not desperation, abundance. And somewhere deep within each man grows a quiet, uneasy realization. The world they thought they understood is far larger, far stronger, and far more capable than the one described to them by the Reich. As the train whistle sounds in the distance, one prisoner exhales slowly and whispers, almost reverently, "We were not prepared for this." The prisoners are led toward the waiting train, its engine already venting thick coils of steam into the cold morning air. The locomotive stands taller and broader than the German engines they once knew. Black steel, heavy rivets, an industrial monument that seems less like a machine and more like a declaration. The guards guide them into long lines, directing each man toward wooden railcars that look weathered but immense. Some prisoners hesitate at the sight of so many freight cars hitched together, dozens, maybe more, stretching far beyond what their eyes can follow. As the first groups climb aboard, the train yard surrounding them becomes clearer. Tracks split and reconnect like veins feeding an enormous mechanical heart. Multiple locomotives are being serviced at once, oiling, fueling, exchanging crews. Men with clipboards check schedules, moving briskly between engines as if orchestrating a vast invisible performance. Nothing stands idle. Nothing waits. Inside the railcar, benches have been fixed to the walls. The guards hand out blankets, rough but clean, then close the heavy sliding doors, leaving only small slits of light. The prisoners settle awkwardly on the benches, still processing what they've witnessed. Some speak in whispers, others sit rigid, trying to hold on to the last remnants of certainty. When the train begins to move, the wooden walls vibrate with a deep, steady rhythm. The first hour passes in silence. Only the clatter of the wheels breaks the tension. Soon the men notice patterns outside, glimpsed through the slits. Factories, warehouses, truck convoys, entire trains running parallel. It seems every direction holds another column of Industry. One prisoner leans toward the window, squinting to see more. "Look," he mutters, "they're everywhere, so many trains, all full." Another adds, "They said America barely had an army. But this is more than an army." The train gathers speed as it leaves the coastal region behind. The scenery changes. Towns appear, their streets wide, orderly, unscarred by war. Children walk to school. Workers head to factories in groups, lunch pails in hand. The prisoners watch in stunned silence. Germany exists in ruins. America seems untouched, thriving. At one point, the train slows as it passes an enormous rail yard. Rows of locomotives stand waiting, massive engines lined like steel beasts poised for release. Hundreds of freight cars sit fully loaded, arranged with geometric precision. A prisoner whose father worked on railways back home presses his forehead to the wooden slats. We never built anything like this," he whispers, "even before the war." The guards inside the car maintain a quiet vigilance. One of them, seeing the prisoners staring out intently, simply says, "You're heading inland long trip. You'll see plenty more." His tone is flat, not mocking, just factual. The statement fills the car with a heavy realization. This overwhelming industrial strength is not rare, it is normal. Hours stretch into the afternoon. The rhythm of the train becomes hypnotic. Occasionally the prisoners exchange fragments of thought. "If they can move goods like this every day," one says. "How could we ever keep up?" Another responds, "We never understood what we were fighting." As daylight begins to fade, the glimpses outside soften into silhouettes. Oil tanks, stockyards, endless telephone lines. The train shows no sign of slowing. With every passing mile, the men understand more clearly that they are traveling through a nation not strained by war, but powered by it. And sitting in that darkened rail car, many prisoners begin to grasp a truth they had never dared consider. Germany had entered a conflict with a giant it never truly saw. The train rolls deeper into the American interior, its steel wheels carving a steady rhythm through the vastness of the landscape. Morning becomes afternoon, and afternoon stretches into an early dusk. For the prisoners packed inside the wooden car, time has slowed into a strange, heavy flow. Yet, outside, everything seems to move with purpose. Lines of telephone poles flash by in perfect intervals. Parallel tracks carry other trains, some moving east, some west, some north, all of them fully loaded. As the Germans watch the endless procession, the scope of what they are seeing begins to overwhelm them. Through the narrow slits between the boards, the POWs observe freight cars marked with names of states they barely recognize. Nebraska, Ohio, Minnesota. Each car is filled with something: timber, fuel drums, machinery crates, agricultural supplies, steel beams, even airplane fuselages wrapped in canvas. The variety alone is dizzying. In Germany, factories struggle to keep pace with basic needs. Here, factories seem to produce everything, all at once, without effort. One prisoner, originally a railway technician in Bavaria, presses close to the slit and stares in disbelief. "They have quadruple track lines," he whispers, "not just one, 4, and all of them are full." He shakes his head slowly, as though trying to dispel a hallucination. This isn't a railway network. It's an organism. The train slows as it approaches another major junction. The prisoners lean forward instinctively, eager for a better view. The junction sprawls across the landscape. Dozens of switches, warehouses, sidings, maintenance sheds, and looping tracks stretching far into the haze. Multiple locomotives maneuver simultaneously, black silhouettes against clouds of steam. Even from inside the car, the soundscape is immense. Whistle blasts, engine roars, metallic clanks, shouted instructions, all blending into a mechanical symphony. A younger prisoner breathes out. It looks like a whole army is moving. An older sergeant replies quietly, "It is. An army of steel." As the train crawls past the junction, they glimpse an assembly yard where workers load tanks onto flat cars. American soldiers oversee the process, but the workers, civilians, move with practiced precision. The tanks gleam under the harsh industrial lights, their surfaces unscarred. Brand new. Built for a war fought thousands of kilometers away, yet prepared in such vast numbers that the prisoners can hardly fathom their destination. Minutes later, the train accelerates again, plunging into open fields lit by a fading sun. Even here, far from the cities, industry lives. Grain silos tower above small towns. Tractors plow winter soil. Trucks rumble along freshly paved roads. The prisoners exchange uneasy glances. This is not the collapsing America they were promised, one man mutters. If they have this much in every state. His sentence trails off. No one answers. The conclusion is too large, too heavy. Night settles slowly. In the darkness, the prisoners can no longer see the landscape clearly, but they can feel it. The vibrations of parallel trains, the distant horns, the deep hum of a nation in motion. They realize they are witnessing not a moment of exceptional effort, but the normal heartbeat of American industry. As the train presses westward, a simple truth starts to carve its way into every mind. Germany had believed it was fighting a weakened, distracted nation. Instead, it had challenged a continent-sized machine whose power extended far beyond battlefields, stretching into every mile of track, every silo, every factory, every engine roaring through the night. And now, trapped inside a rail car, crossing that vast machine, the prisoners finally begin to comprehend the magnitude of the world they once believed they could conquer. By the next morning, the prisoners have grown accustomed to the relentless rhythm of the train, but nothing prepares them for what they witness as the line curves toward one of America's major industrial belts. The car slows just enough for them to see the skyline of factories rising like iron fortresses, vast complexes of brick, steel, and concrete stretching so far across the horizon that the men inside the railcar momentarily forget to breathe. Smoke pours from dozens of chimneys. Conveyor belts carry materials from one building to another. Rows of windows pulse with the flicker of molten metal and machinery. The prisoners lean toward the cracks in the wooden walls, trying to take in the impossible sight. This is not a single factory. It is an ecosystem of factories, interconnected and alive. One POW, a machinist from Saxony, stares as if hypnotized. "Look at the scale. Look at the coordination," he murmurs. "We never had anything like this, not even Ruhrgebiet." He watches as a crane rolls across a rail-mounted platform, hoisting heavy steel components with effortless grace. "And this is only one facility," he adds, almost in disbelief. Another man, younger, speaks more softly. "How many tanks? How many planes? How many guns can they build here?" The question lingers in the cramped air of the railcar, heavier than any answer they could imagine. As the train moves past the industrial giant, they catch glimpses of workers, hundreds of them, walking between buildings, eating lunch on benches, loading trucks, guiding forklifts. Men and women both, in uniforms of denim and canvas. None appear exhausted or starving. None display the strain of a nation under siege. To the prisoners, it is surreal. Germany's factories had become battlefields of their own, bombed, rationed, short on coal and labor. But here, production seems limitless, undisturbed, and almost casual. The train drifts into a valley following tracks that run directly between two enormous steel mills. The heat from the furnaces radiates through the air, creating waves that shimmer even at a distance. Molten metal pours like fire through troughs and channels. Sparks rise in bright fountains. Through gaps in the train car, the POWs watch slabs of red-hot steel being pressed, cut, and moved by machines so large that they look like mythological beasts carved from iron. A former Wehrmacht officer breaks the silence. We were told that American workers were lazy, that they lacked discipline, that democracy made them weak. He shakes his head slowly, eyes fixed on a lumbering overhead crane. Those were lies, he says quietly. Every word of it. The train soon leaves the mills behind, entering a region of factories producing vehicles and aircraft assembly lines stretch from one end of vast hangars to the other. Even from afar, the prisoners can see silhouettes of wings stacked against walls, engines lifted into position, and workers swarming like ants around newly assembled machines. Freight cars loaded with aircraft parts, fuselages, wings, engines, stand ready for transport. A prisoner who once believed in the technological superiority of the Reich whispers, "All of this, and the war for them is still far away. They're building as if nothing threatens them." Another replies, "Nothing does, not anymore." As the train accelerates again, leaving the industrial region behind, the men sit in stunned quiet. They understand now that these were not exceptional sights. They were ordinary examples of America's capacity. Factories like these existed in dozens of cities, and if this was what the prisoners could see from a train window, they could barely imagine what lay deep inside the heart of the United States. The realization settles into them with the slow, cold weight of truth. Germany had not been defeated by ideology alone, nor by strategy, nor by will. It had been defeated by sheer scale, by a nation whose factories were too vast, too numerous, and too unstoppable to contend with. By the time the train pushes deeper into the American heartland, the POWs expect more factories, more rail junctions, more machinery. Instead, the landscape begins to shift. Industrial skylines give way to neat rows of houses, white fences, church steeples, open streets, and wide lawns that stretch beneath a late morning sun. The prisoners lean forward instinctively. After days of mechanical thunder and industrial astonishment, this quiet prosperity surprises them more than any factory ever could. The train slows as it approaches a small town, a cluster of tidy homes, all with painted porches and well-kept roofs. Children ride bicycles along the sidewalk. A woman hangs laundry on a line that sways gently in the breeze. Two men repair a roof, hammering in a steady rhythm that seems almost peaceful. There is an ease to the place, a rhythm unhindered by fear or scarcity. The prisoners stare through the cracks in the wooden slats, struggling to understand how a country at war can look so untouched. One POW, who left behind a bombed-out neighborhood in Berlin, whispers bitterly, "Their homes are whole." Another replies quietly, "Not a single window boarded." The words feel heavy. The contrast is painful. The train rolls past a large school, its yard filled with children playing under the watchful eye of a teacher. Their laughter is faint but unmistakable. The prisoners fall silent. For many, it has been months since they last heard such a simple sound. Germany's schools had been converted into shelters, hospitals, rubble. Here, education continues as though war is a distant rumor. Further down the track, a local baseball game is underway. Men in simple uniforms, families cheering from the sidelines, a dog running between the benches. The sight feels unreal. A young prisoner mutters, "They have time for this?" A sergeant beside him shakes his head, not in anger, but awe. "They have the luxury," he says softly. The train continues west, passing orderly farms and barns painted in clean colors. Horses graze lazily tractors, new, shiny, abundant, crawl across fields in perfect lines. Grain silos rise like monuments, untouched and full. For a group of POWs who grew up on small German farms, the sheer size and productivity are difficult to comprehend. "These fields alone," one farmer prisoner whispers, unable to look away, "could feed an army." Another adds, "And they do." At a crossing, the train pauses briefly as dozens of trucks rumble past, each loaded with goods, each headed somewhere with calm urgency. The POWs strain to see them: flour barrels, crates of produce, baskets of eggs, tools, spare parts, feed sacks. Nothing is rationed, nothing seems scarce. The richness of ordinary life speaks louder than any military parade. Inside the rail car, conversation becomes hushed, introspective. The men begin to compare what they see with what they were told. "We were told Americans were struggling," one says, "that their cities were collapsing." Another replies, "Maybe our leaders told us what they needed us to believe." The train moves on, cutting through another town, another cluster of unbroken windows, another string of busy shops, another main street filled with people who walk without fear of air raids. The POWs watch as if witnessing another world, and in a sense, they are. For the first time, the prisoners grasp the full distance, not just geographic but psychological, between life in the United States and life in wartime Germany. They understand now that America fights a war far from its own soil, powered not only by factories and machines, but by a society that has never stopped living. This too is power. A different kind, a quieter kind, but perhaps the strongest of all. The train presses farther westward, leaving small towns behind and entering a landscape that seems to expand with every passing mile. Fields open into vast plains, and in those plains the prisoners begin to see something even more astonishing than factories or rail yards. An agricultural empire so immense and efficient that it challenges everything they believed about the American war effort. They had been taught that the United States was soft, decadent, poorly organized, but what stretches outside the railcar now feels like the beating heart of a nation designed for endurance. They pass mile after mile of farmland, fields so large that the horizon cannot contain them. Perfect rows of crops roll into the distance in geometric precision. Huge tractors crawl across the soil, moving steadily like iron animals. These machines are not patched together from salvaged parts or commandeered for emergency use. They are new, numerous, purpose-built. A former German farmhand squints through the slits in the wall, studying the machines with disbelief. "That tractor alone," he murmurs, "would pull 3 of ours behind it." Another adds, "They have entire fleets, and this is only one valley." The realization sinks in with a slow heaviness. This is not luxury, it is infrastructure. The train passes a cluster of enormous grain elevators, tall concrete towers that loom over the plains like fortresses. Pipes and conveyor belts hum with constant motion. Trucks unload grain in a steady stream. Rail cars stand beneath chutes, filling with thousands of tons of food bound for factories, ports, and army bases. The POWs watch in silence, astonished at the scale of it all. One prisoner, who once believed he understood warfare, whispers, "This is why they never worry about bread, or boots, or bullets." Another responds, "If they feed themselves like this, imagine how they feed their soldiers." Farther along, the train passes industrial dairies with rows of cattle and automated milking stations, poultry farms with thousands of hens, cattle ranches stretching into open sky. Everything is bigger than anything the prisoners have ever seen, not just bigger, calmer, more structured, more complete. At a road crossing, a column of trucks waits as the train passes, dozens of them, each packed with crates labeled for distribution centers hundreds of miles away. The prisoners watch as the line moves with mechanical efficiency the moment the crossing gate rises. A corporal from Hamburg mutters, "In Germany, civilians fight for scraps. Here, they move food like water." He shakes his head, almost angrily. "This country is too big, too rich. We were fools to challenge it." The train continues westward, and the POWs observe warehouses stacked with sacks of grain, massive barns lined with livestock, and irrigation systems stretching across acres. Each new sight adds another weight to their understanding. This abundance is not the exception, it is the rule. As the car grows quieter, a guard inside notices their stunned expressions. He rests his hand on a crate and simply says, "This is America's breadbasket." The prisoners exchange looks. Breadbasket. The word sounds innocent. But what they've seen is more than food production. It is the logistical backbone of a war machine. Even the younger POWs sense the truth. Germany, with all its discipline and ambition, could never match this scale. Their homeland was compact, land-starved, rationed. Here the land seems endless, the resources boundless. As dusk settles, the plains fade into shadow, but the trains keep running, the trucks keep rolling. The fields remain vast and ready for harvest. The prisoners sit in silence, staring into the darkening landscape. For the first time, many of them understand that abundance itself, quiet, steady, unquestioned, may be the greatest weapon America possesses. When the train finally begins to slow, the prisoners brace themselves. After days of travel, they expect something grim, a harsh prison compound, barbed wire under tension, guards eager to prove their authority. The sliding door creaks open, flooding the car with sunlight. The POWs blink, dazed as the guards motion them out. What they see is nothing like what their imaginations had prepared them for. The camp sits outside a quiet Midwestern town, surrounded by fields and a line of trees. Instead of concrete walls or armed towers, there is a broad clearing, a simple fence, and rows of wooden barracks built with an almost domestic neatness. The buildings are clean, their roofs straight and well shingled. Some even have flower beds planted beside the steps, small bursts of color against the dust. The prisoners file out, stunned by the openness. There is no shouting, no dogs straining at leashes. American guards stand at ease, rifles slung casually. Their posture is alert, not aggressive. They guide the POWs into lines for processing, their gestures calm and practiced. One guard, seeing a prisoner limping, steps forward and offers his arm for support. The German hesitates, unsure if it is a trick. It is not. They pass a medical tent where nurses take temperatures, inspect injuries, record names. A medic lifts a prisoner's sleeve, frowns at an infected wound he had been hiding, and orders him to be treated immediately. The man stares, confused. He had expected contempt, maybe indifference, not concern. Next, the POWs are issued supplies, blankets, soap, clean shirts, simple work trousers, metal cups and plates. Everything is dented, but serviceable. One prisoner turns the cup over in his hands, amazed by the stamp. U.S. Army Quartermaster Depot. Mass-produced, standardized. Even the simplest items reflect a nation with unimaginable industrial reserves. The barracks are long buildings with rows of bunks, mattresses stuffed with cotton, windows that open for fresh air. A stove stands at the center of each room, already warm. The prisoners stand in the doorway, unsure whether they are allowed to feel relief. Some sit on their bunks, touching the blankets as if expecting them to vanish. Others stare at the windows, shocked by the absence of bars. Outside, they see a recreation area, a soccer field marked with chalk, a baseball diamond, even a small library inside a converted storage shed. Nearby, a bulletin board lists tomorrow's schedule, mealtimes, work assignments, English classes for volunteers. The prisoners look at one another, puzzled. English classes? For them? As they explore the camp under supervision, they notice something else. The Americans are not fearful of their prisoners. They are confident, relaxed, almost indifferent to the idea of danger. It is a subtle but unmistakable message. This is not a nation struggling to contain its enemies. This is a nation so secure in its power that it can afford to treat its captives with decency. During dinner, The POWs receive stew, bread, and coffee. It is modest, but plentiful. Some have not eaten so well in months. A young prisoner stares into his bowl for a long time before taking a bite. "They feed us like this," he whispers. Another replies, "Imagine how they feed their own soldiers." As night settles and the camp grows quiet, the prisoners lie awake in unfamiliar comfort. The day has shown them something profound. Victory is not only fought on battlefields. It is built in kitchens, factories, railways, and even in the way a nation treats those it has captured. In this place called Camp America, they begin to understand the true breadth of the power now holding them. The first full day inside the camp begins with a quiet that feels unnatural to the prisoners. No sirens, no distant artillery, no rush to defensive positions. Instead, an American sergeant rings a bell at dawn, and the prisoners file out into crisp morning air, their breath turning white against a pale sky. The routine is simple: roll call, a modest breakfast, then work assignments. Nothing harsh, nothing humiliating. Just order, calm, structured, almost courteous. During breakfast, the POWs eat oatmeal, bread, and what some identify with surprise as real butter. It is more than many had back home. Men exchange glances over their tin trays, trying to reconcile these meals with the warnings they had heard in Germany that Americans were starving, that their economy was buckling under the strain of war. Yet here they sit, eating quietly while guards sip hot coffee from metal mugs as if they are in no rush at all. Work in the camp is divided. Some prisoners head to agricultural fields nearby, others to workshops repairing tools or sewing uniforms, and a few to the library to assist with translation projects. The idea of a library for prisoners would have seemed absurd in Germany. Yet here, under a tin roof and rows of shelves, they find novels, newspapers, dictionaries, even textbooks. One prisoner picks up an American history book and flips through its pages, bewildered by the thickness and quality of the paper. "They waste nothing," he mutters, "but they have enough to make even this." Throughout the day, snippets of conversation drift among the POWs. One man says he overheard the guards discussing new factories opening in Detroit. Another claims to have seen a convoy of trucks passing the camp overnight. A third whispers that his work crew visited a farm where the American owner thanked them politely and offered water. "I thought they would hate us," he says. They don't even seem angry. But it is during the midday break that the cracks in their old beliefs begin to widen. A guard hands a group of prisoners a local newspaper. They read cautiously, expecting propaganda. Instead, they find articles about sports, weather, community events, and buried inside, brief mentions of the war. The tone is factual, almost detached. The war does not dominate the paper. Life goes on. Commerce thrives. The society is not strangled by conflict. It breathes freely. One prisoner, once a devout believer in Nazi superiority, lowers the newspaper slowly. "We were told America was weak," he says, "a giant made of paper." He gestures toward the farms, the roads, the factories beyond the horizon. Paper doesn't build all that. In the evening, a Red Cross representative visits the camp. He speaks to the prisoners through an interpreter, ensuring they are receiving proper treatment. Some men are stunned, an international observer. For them, the very idea that neutral organizations could inspect their welfare feels surreal. In Germany, such oversight would have been unthinkable. As darkness falls, the prisoners gather in small groups, discussing everything they've seen. Their conversations are no longer filled with bravado or ideological certainty. Instead, they speak of contradictions, of disbelief, of questions that cannot yet answer. Everything they had been taught about the United States, its weakness, its decadence, its instability, is unraveling. Germany's vision of the world had been narrow in this camp under the calm, Midwestern sky. That narrowness begins to shatter. Not because of force, but because of evidence, quiet, overwhelming evidence witnessed with their own eyes, for the first time, many prisoners begin to admit a painful truth. The Reich had lied to them. And America, the enemy they expected to hate, is nothing like the monster their propaganda described. By the second week in the camp, the shock of arrival has softened into a steady, unsettling awareness. The German prisoners begin to understand not just what America is, but what it represents, and why the war had unfolded the way it did, the illusions that broke in the train car, and the fields now collapse entirely as they confront a truth too large to ignore. During work assignments, groups of POWs are sent to a nearby lumber mill. The operation is simple but vast, saws humming in perfect rhythm, conveyors feeding logs into cutters, stacks of boards piled with mathematical precision. The foreman, an older man with a calm voice, gives instructions through an interpreter. There is no shouting, no chaos, no fear. Just efficiency. It strikes the prisoners that even this small mill in an ordinary American town is run with a level of organization that Germany struggled to maintain under the bombs. Later, while repairing fences near the road, the POWs hear a constant hum of engines. Convoys move supplies toward distant bases, civilian trucks carry goods to stores, a train whistle echoes across the fields. Everything moves, everything works, nothing is interrupted. Even thousands of miles away from Washington or New York, the country seems to function like a single, unified apparatus. One prisoner, a former officer, watches the passing trucks with narrowed eyes. "It wasn't the enemy at the front that defeated us," he says quietly. "It was this." He gestures toward the road, the fields, the sky. A nation that does not stop, a nation with too much to break. Another man, once fiercely loyal to the idea of German destiny, kneels to tie a bundle of wooden slats. He shakes his head. "We were told they were soft," he says, "but no one who builds all this is soft." In the evenings, the prisoners gather by the barracks to listen to a small radio mounted on a post. The guards allow them to hear selected broadcasts, music, weather reports, agricultural updates. Occasionally, a news bulletin announces the progress of the war. The tone is calm, confident, sober. There are no triumphant roars or theatrical speeches, just facts read evenly into the air. The prisoners are startled by the difference. Here, even victory is spoken of without hysteria. One night, as the sun dips below a line of trees and the radio plays a jazz melody unfamiliar to German ears, a prisoner confesses to his bunkmate, "I don't think we ever understood what we were up against." His companion nods slowly. "We thought we could outfight them, but they were never trying to outfight us." He gestures toward the distant lights of the town. "They outbuilt us, outfed us, outproduced us, by a margin so large we never saw it." The next morning, a Red Cross truck arrives to deliver mail and check the camp's records. The representative chats with guards and prisoners alike, reviewing conditions, inspecting kitchens, observing classes. His presence is calm, bureaucratic, almost routine. To the German prisoners, this oversight feels like another sign of American stability. Systems within systems, checks within checks, all functioning without strain. As they return to their barracks at dusk, one of the prisoners stops and looks back toward the horizon, where a distant factory chimney releases a thin plume of smoke. He stares for a long moment and then says, almost to himself, "We never saw their strength clearly until the war was already lost." In that quiet moment, the others understand what they have witnessed is not military might alone, but something deeper, an industrial civilization of such breadth and momentum that no ideology, no propaganda, no belief in superiority could stand against it. The prisoners of war, once proud and certain, finally grasp the full truth. America had won long before they surrendered. It had won in its fields, its factories, its railroads, its calm confidence, a victory achieved not by chance but by sheer undeniable capability.